Hi, my name is John Moriarty, and this is a case study progress report for the Global Security and Fusion course at Florida State University. That's the online course for the graduate level. My case study is about Hurricane Mitch and the relationship between the United States and Mexico's disaster reduction programs. Um, just to refresh our memory, the path of Hurricane Mitch, why it is such a international spectacle is that really it did cross several political boundaries, and this is one of the main facts that leads to the need for regional cooperation. So Hurricane Mitch started out in the Atlantic, it came into the Caribbean, made landfall in Honduras, affected Nicaragua substantially, as well as El Salvador, then passed through to Guatemala before exiting out through Mexico, where it did a small touchdown in Cuba on the northwest side, and then breezed over the southern tip of Florida. So this was a disaster that really kind of brought together a lot of countries that were all suffering at the same time, the U.S. included. My thesis statement in this case study research report is that the United States is engaged and continues to engage with Mexico in disaster diplomacy with the stated objectives to collaborate on issues of sustainable development, natural resource management, and economic integration, while also leveraging the experience to benefit the domestic emergency management cycle and forming a culture of mutual post-disaster transboundary assistance. Just to elaborate a little bit more on that, that in this case, certainly the United States did experience, and specifically Florida did experience, the effects of Hurricane Mitch. But a lot of these other natural disasters that are touching down in Latin America and the Caribbean, by the U.S. being involved in a regional cooperation initiative, there's the opportunity to leverage lessons learned from this experience and apply them to our own domestic emergency management cycle throughout the mitigation, preparedness, uh, response, and recovery phases. So the literature that I've used up until this point is on the screen here, and just a couple of notes that I'd like to point out is that a lot of the sources and resources that I've been finding are really kind of international organizations like the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the United Nations, and how they are all helping Mexico specifically kind of bolster their ability to prepare for and respond to natural disasters, where the literature surrounding the United States and that impact on Mexico and the relationship growing therein is kind of limited to, so far, what I've seen, the Office for um, Foreign Disaster Assistance, as well as USAID. So in the next few weeks of my research development, I definitely plan on finding more sources that are pointed more towards that relationship between the United States and Mexico. Some of the key frameworks and agreements that have been reached through the U.S.-Mexico disaster cooperation agreements are the United States Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, which has obviously been in effect long before Hurricane Mitch, but it continues to grow and improve with each of these experiences that come through. The International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction is definitely one that has had a strong impact on the United States and Mexico's disaster cooperation relationship. The objective of the International Decade of Natural Disaster Reduction is to have international actions that really just focus on the reduction of loss of life, property damage, and social and economic disruptions. The United States, within that program and their participation, is to continue to focus on the reduction of those same objectives, while also building up the information and technology sharing to foster their incorporation into practice. Um, so particularly in developing countries, and in this case Latin America, Central America, and the Caribbean, um, really the United States is focusing on technology transfer and information sharing and ways of predicting as well as mitigating some of these incoming disasters, which leads right into World Weather Watch, which is again meant to improve the prediction of hazards of all kinds, really atmospheric hazards, flood hazards, um, earthquake hazards, and they do so by having a strong network of data collection and the ability to kind of share that data collection and also source that data collection. So by expanding this regional assistance program, it's not necessarily only to benefit all of the members within the region, but it's also to have each of the members contributing to the data that is being used to help us all. And then the Cooperative Atlantic Storms Program, and then the Memorandum of Understanding between USAID and the Mexican Institute of the Environment, which is focused on natural resource management and disaster management training. Some of the focus areas that the United States and Mexico's relationship is kind of centering upon is that, well, capacity building and training to begin with is critical. Intelligence and information sharing systems, as I just mentioned, improvement of hurricane prediction, again from the previous slide, technology transfer, hazard assessment and loss reduction, communications and monitoring. So up to this point, it's really just a full circle kind of what areas could be improved upon is really what we're trying to accomplish here. In addition to that, and specifically speaking to U.S. interests, natural disasters have a tendency to displace large amounts of people, and the United States definitely has a vested interest in building the capacity to recover from a disaster and avoid a disaster-based migration pattern. And that goes for beyond Mexico, but Mexico being an amazing start. So on the other side of that coin, what the United States is capable of offering to this program is, again, more information and more technology transfer and bringing in more actors such as Canada. So Canada and the United States share a border, and there's several kind of water sources along that border, and there's already collaborative agreements in place on how Canada and the United States can work together, and through this relationship with Mexico, the United States definitely stands to include Canada on the Central American disaster risk reduction programs. They also are looking to improve the development and reconstruction cooperation. This definitely requires further research, but I would be very interested to know what firms are bidding for those construction projects and the reconstruction projects. My guess is that they are going to have some U.S. Companies that are involved in the reconstruction. And then lastly, building Mexico as a disaster reduction model and hub for Central America and the Caribbean. This really stands to benefit everyone involved. I think that with the United States kind of being able to take a step back and allow Mexico to spearhead the disaster reduction program for Central America and the Caribbean speaks volumes to the work that's already been put into Mexico up until this point. But really, having Mexico spearhead some of these disaster reduction programs is a huge benefit to funding, specifically through the Inter-American Development Bank, where it's not necessarily a detriment to have the United States involved in that, but it's definitely looked at much more favorably if a country like Mexico is spearheading that initiative. And then also just serving as a model and letting other Central American and Latin American countries kind of see what Mexico is doing in the way of disaster reduction and the work that they're contributing to on a regional scale.